The evidence is it was not a lovely idea. It was a radical truth claim that Jesus Christ made, to be the eternal pre-existent God revealing himself in human form, to be the way through death out the other side to eternal life. Yes, he talked a lot about love, loving your enemies, forgiving people. He sure did. But he claimed to be God in human form, and he claimed to be the way through death out the other side to eternal life. He's either a quack, maybe a charlatan, as you pointed out, or else he's the truth. And obviously, the first century followers of Christ were...
Highlight whatever you want. You just said it, KKK does it. Muslims, oh yeah, they do. They highlight hitting women, and they do that. Yep. But it is very important to know that infidels, if they attack you, because other than that, there is a chapter at the very end of the Quran where it says, those who you don't believe, I don't worship, like you all have your religion and I have mine.
Right.
So how would you explain that in this case?
Well, I would explain it as there are three different teachings that Muhammad gives at different points in his life. The first one is very peaceful, the second one is self-defense, but the third one is very aggressive. And the problem that my Muslim friends have is to choose which one am I supposed to follow. Jesus Christ never taught us to aggressively go after people. Yes, you can make a case for self-defense.
Jesus was captured early on. Jesus would have done the same thing as all the prophets before. He would have tried to spread Christianity, which is cool. Yeah. I mean, that's what they do, right? I mean, right. Moses did it, and all the ones who before, like, they tried. They didn't know the concept of God yet, but they still tried to do this. Like, hey, life has more meaning.
Right.
But he just didn't have the opportunity. So we don't know like how it would have indulged, like how he dealt with these situations. But yet again, like this is a very big misconception. I mean, I'm Muslim, I've been here since 2009. Yeah. And I disagree with a lot of people on some occasions. But that doesn't mean, I mean, this country's taking care of me. I eat here, I study here.
Good.
It's wonderful. And this is how the rationale of a good Muslim is supposed to be. Now, if you see someone who's in conflict, man, they need more education probably. They need somebody to come, like, dude, here's a chapter. It is what? 4 sentences. It's a 4-sentence chapter with the main focus of paying attention and respecting people and be treated the way you want, treat others the way you want to be treated.
Yeah.
So I just asked, like, it's affecting you. Know that Islam has mentioned Jesus 24 times.
Yes.
You're doing a wonderful job. You want to spread Christianity, you want to convince people that Jesus is there. Wonderful. Use Islam for this point. Don't attack Islam and don't mention Muhammad was violent. Don't do that. I mean, you're not going to get anywhere. Use it to upgrade your knowledge. Muslims, we recognize Jesus. He's mentioned more than Muhammad. But what makes Muhammad, what makes him special, at least in my point of view, I don't know how others believe, is that he told me to recognize each and every single one. He told me to look at him for, like, how he rebelled against. I mean, let's talk about infanticide. Let's talk about how he eliminated this. How he's the only one who eliminated slavery. None of the ones before they tried to eliminate slavery. They didn't have the power to do it. He's the one who did it. It was in his rebellion. And he could have won the world. His family owned Mecca, and he is part of his family. And yet he chose to rebel against slavery. In fact, girls, they used to take girls and bury them alive when they're babies. That's how the situation was. So all I ask of you is to simply acknowledge these beautiful things that Islam did. And in the process, you never know, you'd end up saving lives. Because you keep going, this American stereotypes going, we're gonna keep on getting killed and oppressed and all that. It's kind of a message, but, and again, you still didn't tell me the rebellious violence. I did not buy it, because I know the Quran, and this chapter I memorized it, and here I am telling you I'm a Muslim.
Good. And you know that when you read the Hadith, and when you study the life of Muhammad, when he went back from Medina, back to Mecca.
Hadith is controversial.
We don't know what happened. Come on, sir, let's not act like you don't know what happened.
Oh yeah, but we don't go by the Hadith. A Muslim goes by the Quran. This is the legitimate book. Hadith can be nice. Hadith sometimes can, I mean, no music and no that. Oh, come on, please. I'm not gonna go by this.
Okay.
But my book comes from God, not Muhammad. Muhammad is cool and all, but I don't know. And remember, a lot of people, they were dissenters. They came after him and they messed up the whole Hadith thing. So there are the ones in the Middle East. We know our authors, the one who delivered the Hadith. We recognize, oh, this is a legitimate guy. He asked us to love people, to respect people. But then you go to the other one, and like, oh no, don't listen to music, it's evil, don't listen to come on, like anybody
You're
can,
back.
you know?
Well, I appreciate you and I respect you totally, all right? But let's be honest.
Yes.
Repeatedly in the Quran we read,
Uh-huh.
Jesus is not God.
True.
Okay.
He's a man. Uh-huh.
Repeatedly in the Gospels, Jesus claims to be God.
Okay.
So we have a contradiction. So now we got to figure out, are we going to trust a guy who was born over 500 years after Christ, Muhammad, to be our primary source of information about Jesus? Or are we going to trust the eyewitnesses who saw Christ, heard him, to be our primary source of information?
In the Old Testament, which is much older than Jesus Christ himself, Muhammad is mentioned in name, which makes Muhammad, he doesn't really need that much recognition since he has already been mentioned. Now, of course, you're not going to look at the...
Where is he mentioned in the Old Testament?
It needs to be read in the Hebrew, that's why. Because when you translate a name...
Yeah, I had to learn Hebrew in seminary. Where in the Old Testament is Muhammad talked about?
Unfortunately, I don't know where. But if you Google it right now, if you say, is Muhammad mentioned, it will tell you yes. Pull it out right now.
Well, that's
now,
wrong.
Here's
Whoever wrote that on the internet is wrong. Muhammad is never mentioned. Sir, Muhammad wasn't born until 570 AD. The Old Testament was written BC. So Muhammad is not mentioned in the Old Testament.
But Hagar is. Hagar is the slave lady. They were separated. And God promised them in Genesis, the one that you know, that they will have their own life. That's how you're supposed to recognize Muhammad. It's from this lineage.
All right.
If you don't notice that, I mean, I'm sorry and all. But you do know the family tree, right? I mean, I'm hoping. Because, you know...
No, Hagar had Ishmael. Ishmael was not Muhammad. Hagar was not Muhammad.
But Muhammad is a descendant from Ishmael.
All right.
They were giving the honor of defending the center of the universe, the Kaaba. That's their position.
Right.
That's the one who's like, people don't talk about this. But you don't see what's going on. But Hagar was taken to Saudi. I mean, it was called something else back in the day. And they built the Kaaba that is standing right now. We do the pilgrimage to it. It was built by a cooperation of Abraham and Ishmael. And of course, a lot of things happened during, like, idolatry started to come in. But the Hajj process is very old, and even probably older than Judaism. The Hajj process, it was misdirected. It was until Muhammad came in. And he directed people that Hajj is supposed to be to God only.
Right.
So this is the importance of Muhammad. Yeah, of course, I mean, Hagar was kind of thrown out after a couple of sentences, and then the focus became on Sarah, Jacob. Yeah. I mean, that's what happened.
Right.
But this Christian people, like, they don't know this. I found like most of them don't.
So
they don't recognize this.
I'll just take two. I mean, so for me personally, how he got his prophecy, right? He was suicidal at the time, and he was trying to throw himself off a mountain a bunch of times, right? And Namus had to come and save him, and that's how he got his prophecy.
I have no idea where you get this from.
Okay.
But let me tell you, he wasn't.
Oxford.
He didn't go because he was suicidal.
Right.
He actually goes to the cave to like some sort of like meditate.
Okay.
And yes, do you know why? Do you know why he meditates? Do you know why?
You tell him, please.
I will tell you.
Please.
It's because his people, they were burying young girls.
Right.
And he belongs to the same guys, and he's looking. He's like, no, something's wrong.
Good. Now my second
why.
question. This one hits home for me. I'm really going to enjoy just your approach to it because it'll help me.
Absolutely.
You brought up terrorism. You brought up terrorism. And I'm totally with you. I think it is absolutely horrible how my Muslim friends back home in Connecticut who I've talked to, the misrepresentation there is terrible. It is so hateful, and it's the furthest thing from love and truth, right?
Okay, yes.
But when you look at, so when CNN a couple years ago ran the story of the woman who was mentally handicapped, right, and had mental illness, I hope you remember this, burned a Quran.
Okay.
And there were thousands of men who beat her to death and then threw her off the top of a building. What is, help me there, how does this understanding of the burning of a Quran, why does that increase violence? And is it just a misinterpretation and so many people get it wrong?
I will help you.
Yeah.
And in one word, it's people.
Okay.
It's not religion, it's people. Just like the KKK, I mean, don't get me started on lynching and everything, right? I mean, that's...
Well, yeah, I'm going to push back.
And trust me, if it's within their reach, they would still do it. If it's within, if they're not encompassed very well within the law, or at least that's what I think. I don't know. God knows what the upcoming days are holding. But it's people. Religion is innocent. Religion
Yeah.
is beautiful. When you read the Quran, it's beautiful. It's
Yeah.
perfect. It's perfection.
Okay.
Don't-
So I think that's wrong. Here's why. Okay. So you're gonna pick on religion just in general. Okay. The KKK is very small. If we're gonna talk about an Orthodox faith, right? We'll take Orthodox Christianity, Orthodox Muslim faith. Okay. I'm going to say the majority of Islamic faith over there in the Middle East that I've seen prone to violence. You're going to compare that to the Christianity, the Orthodox Christianity that you see today, the majority of it. You're going to say it's just as peaceful? Help me there, because I'm missing that.
It's just people. It's people. That's all I can tell you.
So religion has nothing to do, there's no connection with what motivates them,
No, see,
what
there's
drives
everything.
them?
See, religion has everything for you. If you open the book right now in Quran,
Yeah.
you read it from one part to the other part, all over it.
Yep.
You would be convinced. And
Pretty
that's
large
how
portion of it.
it's
Yeah.
supposed to be.
Yep.
Now, it just happened that these people are not convinced. And remember something, ISIS, they're having a major play in this. They
Major
know
misinterpretation. I'm with you.
they are
I agree.
misinterpreted, but
Yeah.
they know how to find weakness in human beings,
Mhm.
and that's why you see these giant numbers. Europe, man, Europe is scary right now.
Yeah.
I mean, most of those people
Yeah.
you're talking about are actually Europeans.
I talked to this will help. I talked to an imam. I had him to our. He works for the UN. He's very, very high up, and he was honest enough to say to me, I don't know if you would go this far. He was honest enough to say to me that he has to take large portions of the Quran and say, what's true for me is true for me, and what's true for you is true for you. So it's a very liberal approach because he sees the violence in the Quran and the Hadith, but I guess you don't see it.
No, there are violence, but it's because of people.
Mhm.
But name me one part of violence that you see in the book. That's what I'm requesting of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, people. Yeah, they're being brainwashed. That is happening, man.
Right.
Everybody sees that. But name the part in the Quran that says that. That's what I want from you. Can you do it?
Yeah.
Can you pull out anything that you can? Pull something from Muhammad's
Sure.
history?
Yeah, definitely. So I have looked up a lot of those passages. I'll bring you tomorrow, verse by verse, if you'll come back. Right? I can't quote the
is it
Quran.
I mean, I would
Yeah,
love
every
to
day
have-
this week. Every day this week
I
we'll be
would
here.
love to have like as many people, because
Good.
again, you didn't answer me.
Yeah.
We know that you didn't
Kill the
answer
infidel
me.
is said upwards of 10 times. So we'll go back and we'll argue that tomorrow.
Okay.
And then
But
also
then when you
back
bring the
to hold
infidels-
on. Back to his point, right? If you look at Muhammad's life,
Okay.
later on in his life, he becomes violent, right? In terms of when he doesn't see the mass conversions going on that he wants to see, he turns violent, right? And then all of a sudden you see this justice, and so you're talking about, no, kill the infidel is simply a matter of somebody saying, no, I'm going to defend myself. Kill the infidel is just in the matter of defense. Okay, if you're being honest, can you be honest with me? That's not true. Okay, good.
But here's what happens. Well, he did not kill this way. But here's what he invented, or at least the Islamic invented
Yeah.
at the time. It's called the law of jizya. This is a law that is the very first time it was used under the Islamic rule, in which people, if they're Christians,
Yeah.
if they're Jews, they would pay a very minimal amount when they would keep their practice. Muslims, they are under the protection of Muslims. They're not touched by anything. They're under protection.
Yeah.
This was never been used. Roman Empire, if you don't follow them, you probably know what's going to happen. All of them, Assyrians, you name it. It was Islam who came up with this law. And of course the Ottoman Empire, they used it again. They actually they sent ships around Europe. But it's merciful. Don't you dare tell me it's not merciful. When in times and harsh like these, you would pay something so minimal, and you would keep your religion and your practice, and you have an army of Muslims that protects you. Can you tell me this is not mercy? In times like these, and how the empires have operated for ages?
Mercy, not love. Yes, mercy. So, and that's the biggest difference. That's why I love so much of what the Quran and Islam stands for.
Then
There
show
is
it.
a lot of mercy. But, so I'm simply comparing the two.
Okay, go ahead.
The Christian faith is all about love. The Islamic faith is way more about mercy. But we can never go to the point of love with the Islamic faith, right?
Why not?
Okay, tell me, how can we? Is Allah a God of love?
Yes, why not? Please.
I've just never been told that. I simply know it's submission and mercy.
Man, I don't know what kind of Muslims you've been talking about, man. I'm sorry. Of course he is. I mean, we are inspired. I mean, Jesus is wonderful. I'm not here to try to convert people or anything. I mean, Quran is
Why not?
inspired.
Why aren't you here to convert people?
Because Islam is already the #1 conversion rate. I mean, let me...
Okay, so there's 2.5 billion Christians, 1.7 billion
Conversion.
Muslims.
I'm not saying there are more.
So you don't need to convert. So what's the point of converting? Can we get at that?
It's
focus on
true.
converting.
It's true. I mean, if you personally, would you rather find someone that is atheist, or would you find like someone Muslim? But then again, my main request...
It doesn't really matter to me. Yeah. Keep going.
It doesn't, because you probably look at them the same, and I want to change that.
So you're saying Muslims are better than atheists?
I'm not. I'm just saying...
You just said that.
No.
What did you say?
I mean, Islam is... I mean, you're a man of the book, right? And if you don't recognize Islam as one of the people of the book, I'm sorry for you. I honestly am. Because what is the part that made you say that God is not love? Tell me. What do you mean you didn't see it? And yet you propose that, you say you know a lot of Muslims.
Allah, it's all about submission. Submit to Allah's will. He's a God of mercy.
Aren't you submitting to Jesus?
Certainly. But what is Jesus? Jesus gave his life for us on a cross. Okay, so now we're getting to love and grace. I love it. Here we go.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
So Jesus Christ and the Christian message is all about love and grace. And you see that with the cross, clearly. Okay, the Islamic faith, along with the Buddhist faith and many others, you're going to see, whether it's karma, whether it's it's all works righteousness based. It's how good of a person are you, correct?
That's both of us.
Beautiful. No,
Okay.
it's not both of us. Careful.
Islam is not, so you're saying Islam
Absolutely not.
Okay.
And here's why I'm going to, and I want to get into the emotional here. It's enough just intellectual. I'm going to get into the emotional here, and here's why. If we simply live our lives, even if it's our religions, based off of, what can I do to get to heaven? Can I be a better person? That is just the same. It's in the same area of, okay, I'm going to be a better business. It's the same competitive drive. I'm going to be a better businessman than you. I'm going to be a better lawyer than you, right? The cross of Christ comes in, strips that underneath, right, cuts it right off at the knees and says, no, hold on here. Jesus did that for you. And so you're moving, and this is where the emotional comes in, you're moving from a place of, I need to do it all my own. So if my parents want me to be a great businessman, if my parents want me to be a great basketball player, and I really respect my parents, I got to live in that kind of way. And if in Islam we see this matter of, I better be this kind of a good person in this kind of competitive way, I better be that good in order to get to paradise, right? The Christian faith is different simply in the sense of you are already approved, Jesus Christ says, and so you can go out in freedom to do great works instead of having to prove your worth, prove yourself as a good person, as a good businessman. Okay? And so do you see how that's limiting as opposed to freeing?
Actually, they're both based on the fact that if you're a good person, you would be in heaven, and if you're bad, I mean, what are you going to tell me the cross will save you? It will save like Hitler and versus just an average, Muslim that is okay and safe. They're going to receive different treatment. And let me tell you, in Islam, and Jesus, by the way, we don't say he's crucified. It says he seemed, which kind of seems to go with what you say. I mean, when you say Jesus crucified, but then he wakes up, it's kind of the same thing as it seemed to them that he was crucified, but he wasn't. They're kind of the same sentence if you think about it. And that's what the Quran says. So, dude, Jesus is legit in the Quran. I can tell you things that even the Bible doesn't have. I can tell you stories about Jesus that you don't know. That's what the Quran has.
Yeah, what's one?
What's one?
Yeah.
Is that the fact that he made an animal, like a bird, out of the clay.
Uh-huh.
Of course, all the other ones are mentioned. Treating the leprous, the blind, all those are mentioned.
Yeah.
His mother is mentioned. She has her own chapter. Jesus is mentioned. He has his own chapter.
He made an animal out of clay? What was the significance of that?
It's like the significance of treating the leprous and raising the dead is the same concept. That's exactly. It's to prove that people.
No, I would say that's to reverse what we see with entropy, with our fallen human world, depravity, all of his miracles, whether it's with the lepers, the poor, the blind man, all of those are simply to reverse what we have here on earth, right? We have sinfulness, fallenness. Turning a bird into a piece of clay, No, there would be no purpose for Jesus to do that in that sense, right?
Why not?
If we're talking about the miraculous.
Why not? I mean, Moses threw his stick and ate snakes, all the snakes. Are you gonna tell me that doesn't have like a significance?
Yeah.
Why this doesn't?
That was, again, there was purpose to that. What's the purpose to your little clay animation?
I have a really big issue with is when talking to people who have an objection to moral objectivism, and yet they have this reaction when people talk about the Old Testament, and they talk about, oh, well, it was the culture of the time, How is God's objectivity of morality with the culture that he exists in any different from the way that atheists or agnostics would look at moral objectivism? It follows the same train of logic. It's this idea that, yes, there's this base good that kind of exists, but it takes a different form and a different shape depending on where you are. And it seems even stranger and more difficult to explain if you attribute that to the idea of a God who says, I am what I am, and who claims to have ultimate knowledge, ultimate truth, all of these different things. How could his ideas about morality change in any respect? And there felt like a blatant contradiction in what you said earlier when you said, well, or actually it wasn't you, it was your friend. I'm afraid I don't know his name, but he said something. He was the one who brought up the idea of, oh, you have to look at the culture of the time, and then you came up and said, well, God is above our culture. God is above thinking about culture in terms of morality, but it seems to me that he can't be doing both at the same time, and the idea that morals evolve with culture is very similar to moral objectivism, and I feel like the only difference in how that would work is God, and if you don't prescribe to the idea of God, then that argument kind of falls flat on its face.
Okay. Genesis chapter 1 and 2, we have the perfect creation. Genesis chapter 3 and following, we have a defaced, messed up creation. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, the rest of the Bible records how God communicates to different cultures, to different individuals. David is a man after God's own heart. Great. But David had several wives, lots of concubines. He commits adultery with Bathsheba and murders her husband Uriah. Is this a man after God's own heart? Yeah. He's got a lot of sins, a lot of problems. And so what you have in the Bible, both the Old and the New Testament, is how God communicates to people who live in different cultures with bad habits, taught bad lessons by mom and dad, by the status quo, and God is working with these people, drawing them to himself.
But you wouldn't disagree with the idea that God according to the Bible, God drew the moral lines in different places at different points in history. There was a specific time when a certain action was met with execution, and later it was met with retribution or just being considered wrong in some respect. The line of punishment had changed, and actually even the perception of certain things as morally incorrect changed. I mean, like you said yourself, well, their treatment of women at the time, that was about the culture, and like you had to work within the culture in order to get his message across or whatever it is. But then later, in a different culture, Paul was very specific about, oh, no, this culture, you're supposed to be inclusive of women, this type of thing. It feels like the idea itself has changed, not even just the punishment, because I've listened to people make the argument of, well, God just demands judgment of some kind, and Jesus, he was the ultimate judgment, he changed the way that he looks at moral issues, and so on and so forth. But I mean, it seems like he redefined the bounds of morality to see certain things as good that used to be bad in some respect. And
never once does that happen anywhere in the Bible. Instead, what you have is, you have God tightening the noose on evil. It's that simple. Never once does God say polygamy is good, but he works with many polygamists, named Abraham, Jacob, David, Solomon, and he works with those polygamists, pulling them out of it. Never once does God say that slavery is good, but he works with a bunch of slaveholders, pulling them out of slavery and their attitudes toward slavery. So, God is patient. Jesus was patient with his own disciples. His own disciples betrayed him, denied him, deserted him. And guess what? You're the same way and I'm the same way. God has to be patient with us. He never changes the moral laws. But instead, due to the hardness of our hearts, yes, He continues to patiently wait for us to move out of our cultural biases, out of our personal weaknesses and sins and bad habits. Yes, He sure does.
Well, I came out here a couple weeks ago, and there was a man very similar to you who did a similar setup like this. We were talking about history, the historical evidence behind the Bible, and I actually got to a point in the conversation where he said to me, well, you know, you have to not have a supernatural bias in order to look at the history of the Bible and see it as true. Because I made the point that, yes, I mean, like if you look at the basic facts of what happened in the Bible, there are very similar things. Like you can definitively prove that there were certain people who existed in certain places at certain times, but it doesn't automatically draw all the lines that the Bible makes. And he said something to the effect of, well, you can only make that assumption if you have a bias innately against the supernatural. And I don't think that that's a good way to look at history. I mean, like, where do we draw the line as to where we look for our supernatural biases? There are plenty of historical documents and different cultures who have created history of some kind that involves the supernatural, but those are not revered with the same truth as the Bible in a lot of people's minds. And I mean, what would you say about the historical accuracy of the Bible, considering that, I mean, yes, it is very easy to prove that there were certain people who existed in certain times and places, but doesn't necessarily prove the broader picture that the religion is trying to paint. You're reading the Bible.
Yeah, I'm reading the Bible.
Good job. And you're going through all of the events, and history can prove that, yes, there was a man named Jesus.
History can't prove anything. There's evidence, right? Can't prove anything. I can't prove to you that Jesus lived. Boatload of evidence he lived.
Okay, but there's evidence that certain things in the Bible are true. There's evidence that there are certain people who existed. There is evidence that there are certain events that took place.
Yes.
And I just don't understand why this particular text is looked at differently than any other old historical text.
Well, it's real simple. I'm not asking you to look at the Bible differently from any other book. I'm not asking you to accept the Bible as the Word of God. I think you'd be foolish to accept the Bible as the Word of God, because I said so. All right? I'm asking you to accept the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, simple as his history, because the evidence is they give you an accurate historical picture of Jesus of Nazareth. So read it simply as history, not as the Word of God, and then ask yourself, does the historical evidence of the way he lived, taught, died, and rose from the dead point to Christ being the truth, or does it point to him being a quack? If the evidence is he's a quack, reject him. But if the evidence is Jesus is reliable, you'd be very wise to put your faith in him.
Here's where I run into an issue with that, though, is simple misinterpretation. I mean, at the time...
What does that mean?
No, wait. If you're a magician in the town square of some town back in Jesus' time, and you have a trick that lets a little puff of fire fly up from your hand, and people will look at that and say, oh, well, something supernatural is happening. It's their sincere belief that this thing has happened, but
all right.
In actuality, it's probably just a part of it.
But because I'm not out here to waste your time or my time, I'm going to answer you head to head. If you think the evidence is that Jesus Christ was a charlatan who just did magic tricks, you'd be a fool to put your faith in him. But when you read the Gospels, the evidence is he opened the eyes of a blind man, he raised his dead buddy Lazarus to life, he fed the hungry, he clothed the naked, he died on a cross, he was really dead, because in the Gospel of John we read that a Roman soldier jammed a spear into his side, and an issue of watery serum flowed out from clotted blood. They buried him in a tomb, a well-known tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. They were not true believers. They were Christ deniers, Christ betrayers, Christ deserters. 3 days after he's put in that tomb, he appears risen from the dead, first of all to a grief-torn woman, and obviously the testimony of women meant nothing in that culture, but he appeared first of all to some grief-torn women. Then over a period of 40 days, he appears to over 500 people, and then all of a sudden these monotheistic Jews start putting their faith in him right and left. So if you think he was a magician after reading that, That's your decision.
Well,
I feel very sorry for you, but there's nothing I can do. That's your decision.
I hope you don't think that I meant that I think that the character of whoever this Christ man was is innately out there to try and deceive people. It may just be the reception of the audience.
I'm sorry, but that's what you were saying.
Well,
okay?
no, but
yes. That's what you were saying, and I got to take what you say seriously.
Okay, but I'm trying to say that it's comparable to say that the speaker's intention does not necessarily mean the audience's reception. So let's go ahead and even say that the guy tried to explain to people, oh, well, this is just a parlor trick, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to believe what he said. I mean, if you want to talk about the reception of Christianity also, I mean, even Christians themselves will say this was a revolutionary idea. I mean, the second that this idea sparked up that there was this universal peace and love, it really is a wonderful idea and was a great theology for the time, and that's why I think it spread so well, not because of any divine truth or any
Really?
Yes,
That's why Christianity spread so well in the first century?
it was a lovely idea, I think.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely that Paul got his head cut off. Lovely that Peter got crucified upside down. Lovely that every one of his apostles got martyred. You've got to be kidding me. You think the first century followers of Christ followed Christ because they thought it was a lovely idea. No, sir. They followed Christ because they were convinced he was the truth. And it wasn't a lovely idea. Instead, it was a horrible idea that led to their death. Rather cruel death for every single one of those first 12 apostles. So let's not get lost in the translation here. The evidence is it was not a lovely idea. It was a radical truth claim that Jesus Christ made, to be the eternal pre-existent God revealing himself in human form, to be the way through death out the other side to eternal life. Yes, he talked a lot about love, loving your enemies, forgiving people. He sure did. But he claimed to be God in human form, and he claimed to be the way through death out the other side to eternal life. He's either a quack, maybe a charlatan, as you pointed out, or else he's the truth. And obviously, the first century followers of Christ were convinced he's the truth. We're following him.
I don't find their conviction any more compelling than I would any other ancient culture's conviction. I mean, there were people who believed in Poseidon and Zeus, and
Yeah.
I mean, you can say that the strength of anyone's convictions is evidence towards the truth of the matter, but I don't think that that's necessarily true.
And I never made that point. You put words in my mouth. I never made that point once. My point was simply responding to your idea. It was a lovely idea. They believed in it because it was a lovely idea. It was not a lovely idea. It led to their death. Not a lovely idea.
Well, I was simply trying to point out that the philosophy was revolutionary for ordinary people at the time. You know, you didn't have to be a priest or anything like that. It was this idea that, oh, well, anyone who accepts this philosophy and this idea is met with love and of God on high. Because, I mean, the question of God wasn't even a question back then. That's the thing. I mean, like, ancient cultures, they never really had the question of, oh, is there a God? It was, oh, which God is it? You know, it's very easy to try and compare the way that they thought about facts or logic in the same way that we do. But I mean, like, they were just working with a smaller hand of cards. They interpreted their information based off of the small amount of things that they knew. And it's easy for them to come up with conclusions that are not necessarily true. Okay, so we just fundamentally disagree on that issue. But,
I think we got a few fundamental disagreements.
No, that's cool, man.
Well, yeah, but you got to look at the culture. The culture that Jesus Christ stepped into was syncretistic. It was clearly there are many gods. And the reasons that the Romans executed the Christians was because they would not worship Caesar. And emperor worship was obviously the way, at that point in history, the Roman emperors were unifying the Roman Empire. And all the Christians had to do was, they could believe in their Jesus, but they had to acknowledge Caesar was Lord. And they said, no, Jesus is Lord, not Caesar, and they died for it. Why? Not because of a belief, because they had said, we've seen Jesus risen from the dead, he is risen, he is Lord, and they died for it.
Is that claim not saying that part of the evidence is the strength of their conviction? You're saying that they were so convinced, you believe that they saw what they saw, and that they were so convinced. Their strength in their own belief is evidence for you to look at at the Gospels as more truthful?
No, I'm not using the strength of their conviction. I'm using psychology. You don't have to be a psychological whiz to realize people will not die to cover up what they know to be a lie. Just look at Watergate. Dean, Ehrlichman, and Haldeman were not going to go through prison in order to cover up what they knew to be a lie, the Watergate scandal. How much more unlikely that a group of first-century Palestinian peasants are going to make up this lie. We saw Jesus risen from the dead, knowing full well they had never seen him risen from the dead. But in order to cover up their lie, they're going to die. No, it is impossible. It has nothing to do with their conviction. It has to do with the nature of the truth claim. And the nature of the truth claim is, I saw the man die. He was buried. I saw him rise from the dead. I am willing to die for what I saw. If they didn't see it, they died to cover up what they knew to be a lie that they had constructed, that the dead Christ had risen from the dead. It's not an issue of conviction only. It's partially conviction. It's really an issue of truth claim. Did I see this or not? And if I did see it, I'm convinced it's true.
Okay, well, yeah, a couple of things on that. One, I would like to ask you how you feel about the Jewish people having believed in the old gods of the Middle East at the time. You know, when they write about Baal, they're not saying, oh, he's not a real god. They used to believe in these other gods and believe that theirs was the strongest. Is that not, again, a form? And you would assert, I'm guessing, that those gods do not exist, and yet it's what they believe. This is part of how they can see things and misinterpret it. You know, those gods don't exist. We all know that Baal is not a real god. We know that for a fact. There are so many gods that we've all just thrown into the chasm of, oh, totally unexplainable, ridiculous garbage. These are beings that they believed in, and it shaped the way that they looked at things. Like when it didn't rain, it was because I'm not sure who the rain got. In fact, I think it was Baal. But
It was.
Hey, look at that. But if it didn't rain, they would interpret that as Baal is angry or Baal is unhappy.
Yep.
These types of things. This is how the culture's interpretation, and again, the strength of their conviction has nothing to do with it. They can believe wholeheartedly that that's how it happened, based on the evidence and the information that they had at the time, but it doesn't necessarily prove anything, or it's not it's not even convincing to me as pointing in the direction of the argument of the supernatural.
Okay, fine. Well, I'm going to take a gamble here. I don't know you. I don't know what you believe. But I want you to do me one favor. I want you to tonight put together what you do believe and what's the evidence that what you believe is true. And I want you to come out here tomorrow or later this week and tell me.
All right.
Okay?
Yeah, why not?
Well, there are a lot of reasons why not. Remember what I've asked you.
No, I've never been.
What are you living for? Obviously, you're a pretty motivated guy. You're articulate. You think well. What are you living for? And secondly, what's the evidence that what you're living for, and I obviously don't have the faintest idea what it is true? And I'm going to take a shot at it that it ain't nothing compared to the evidence that Jesus Christ is reliable.
All right, well, there you go.
But I will be corrected tomorrow or anytime when you come out, and we're not going to play the theoretical game of going after Baal or whatever. We're going to get real personal. I'm standing out here and saying the reason that I trust Jesus Christ is because the evidence of his life, teachings, death, and resurrection is he is more reliable than any other option. My experience is science, making money, family are all good, really good. They're lousy gods. I'm going to use my experience, I'm going to use my intellect, I'm going to use historical evidence to point to the reliability and the credibility of Jesus. And I just want you to do the same. I want you to just come out here and explain to me what is a better alternative to Christ when it comes to evidence, when it comes to experience of how whatever it is you believe really makes sense in the way you experience life. I can hardly wait.
Can you elaborate on experience?
Yeah,
One more
absolutely. My experience is I have a free will. And every night I judge myself. And I ask myself, was that a wise decision or an unwise decision? And I've got a lot of friends who are materialists, secularists, which means there is no God, which means all of reality is matter and energy. Majority of my secular friends, the majority of my secular friends understand, therefore, the main purpose of life is to make money. And I tell you, I got some friends who can make money like none of you guys can. All right? So they're good at what they do. But I can promise you, if you will think about that and look at your experience of what that does to a marriage, a family, and what it does to your insides, to reduce the purpose of life essentially to be to making money, you're going to realize, whoa, I've missed the boat. And what's a midlife crisis? A midlife crisis is a guy, and I get to work with a number of them, because I live right outside New York City, and I get to work with a number of guys who work on Wall Street. A midlife crisis is a guy who's had faith that a career on Wall Street, that is the purpose of life. That's where it's at. That's where fulfillment and happiness is really going to come. And all of a sudden they're beginning to realize, shoot, I blew it. It's not all it was cracked up to be. So I look forward to hearing your answer tomorrow.
Sorry if I've annoyed you through this whole thing.
No, you're a delight. I love talking to you.
I've enjoyed this. I missed you. But
I missed you. I think it's a privilege to talk with you, okay?
Well, thank you.